Today we're going to work on the skill of comparing two authors' perspectives on a similar topic. This is important because we know that authors communicate information based on their opinions. And so when you have a common topic but written by two different authors, each one might have a slight bias or a different way of presenting those facts. As a critical reader, you need to be able to sift through what the author's perspective is in order to determine what facts are included or may be omitted, and then make a better judgment for yourself what you believe to be true. The nice thing is that once you know how to identify the author's perspective in a single story, it's not that much of a stretch to be able to compare two different stories written by two different authors for their different perspectives. As a review, when you're looking at the author's perspective, you can start by looking at the title and that introductory paragraph. Often the author will state right in the beginning what it is he or she thinks about the topic. From there, you can then skim through the text headings. These are almost like mini titles, and they can provide additional insight into what the author thinks about that topic. Next, you want to really dig deep into the facts or the evidence the author chooses to present. Remember, authors make decisions as they are writing. They choose to include some facts and they choose to omit or to not give as much emphasis to other facts. By looking at what facts are most strongly supported, you can get a clue to what the author's opinion may be stating. Going even deeper, you can look at the author's word choice. Specific words have connotative meaning. They have secret meaning hidden within them, and they communicate an author's opinion or their feelings about a subject. So look carefully at the words being selected to determine how that communicates the author's opinion or bias. And finally, sometimes it's nice to look at the author's credentials or the source where the site was published. Sometimes that can give you a clue about who's funding that research or the author's bias based on his or her background. So, today for practice, we have two articles that are titled the same thing. Should you get a flu shot or should I get a flu shot? So that doesn't really tell me a whole lot about what the authors are communicating. You can skim through that first paragraph in each one of these, and I notice in this one it basically says that while the flu season is underway, doctors say it's better to have a vaccination than not. Versus in this one, the author basically ends by saying it's up to you, but here are some things to consider. So that's kind of giving you a clue that maybe this author is going to challenge what is the prevailing thoughts in society. So starting with our title and looking at our introductory paragraph, already we're starting to get a feel that maybe this guy is saying that the perspective is you should get a shot. And maybe even just looking at the image here, we're thinking perhaps the flu shot isn't a good thing. Let's confirm it with additional details. The next step was to look at the headings. So in this author's headings, we see things like, it's not too late, not an all or nothing game. Compare this to over here, where we say the flu is not a life-threatening disease. Flu vaccines are often ineffective, and there's long-term health risks to the flu vaccine. Already the author's perspective is really starting to shine through. We're saying it's not too late to get it, it's not an all or nothing game. This paired with the statement here lets us know that this author is probably saying you should get the flu shot. That is his or her perspective. This one, though, is talking more about the downside of the flu shot. It's ineffective, there's health risks associated with it, and the flu itself isn't life-threatening, so those health risks aren't warranted. If we want to confirm it even further, we can look at the specific details. I've highlighted those in green in each story. So as you skim through, we can talk about the evidences. Doctors say it's better to get it. It can be beneficial. We hear that it's only 10% effective, but patients are flooding into the office, and those who do have the flu shot show symptoms that are less severe, and that it tends to be higher effectiveness on certain strains than others, and that it can reduce the risk of being ill between 40 to 60%. All of these facts and opinions are very one-sided. They all are communicating reasons why we should get the flu shot. If you're really thinking about, is the author omitting anything, the author really didn't tell us any downside to the shot. Compare that to the details over in this other story. When we're looking at this one, it talks about how for most folks, the flu is just extremely uncomfortable, but it's a fact of life, and that the public health community is overstating the risks of the flu. And that really, for most of us, getting sick is inevitable. It's just part of life, not something that we need to really be scared about or try to avoid at all costs. Going further, it talks about how just because you get the shot doesn't mean you won't get the flu, that the flu vaccine is a guess, because there isn't just a single virus that causes the flu. Instead, there's lots of different ones. So basically, when they try to cover 3 out of the 300 possible strains, you only have a 1% chance of getting it right. And that basically it's going to be useless if you don't get it at the right time. Going on further, it talks about how it really doesn't even protect the old or the very young, which are the most susceptible, and that if it works at all, it probably won't help those who have the highest risks of complication. Now you can keep going through here, but it's pretty clear on this one, the author is basically presenting all of the negative sides of the flu shot. There wasn't anything that talks about how it reduces the strength of the virus or that it can shorten the duration of it. There's nothing that balances out the two sides of the story. All of the facts seem to be weighted towards the opinion that the flu vaccine isn't necessary. The final thing you can do is to look at specific word choice. So again, thinking here, we have words like better or beneficial, and that how it's not the whole story when they talk about it's only 10% effective, that it can stop those people who are flooding into the office. It's kind of that urgency, get it now, people are flooding into the office, and it makes it less severe. All of this word choice, again, is very positive, supporting that opinion that we should get the flu shot. Compare it to this one, where we talk about how it's up to you, but maybe it really shouldn't be up to you. Maybe there's opinions that make it, or reasons and facts that make it so that there's a better opinion than just what you can decide on your own. When they talk about things being overstated or being particularly ineffective, when they talk about it being useless, when they say if the vaccine works at all with italics to emphasize that word if, all of these things really let you know what that author is communicating. Plus, when they talk about words like serious health conditions and how it's toxic and has long-term risks, the author is pretty clear in his or her opinion that the health vaccine or the flu shot is not going to be something that's beneficial. The last thing you can do, again, is to always think about the credentials. On this one, we know that there's articles written by Susan, who writes for the Daily News, something that seems fairly reputable. Compare it to Emily, who's writing for something called Holistic Squid, Healthy Living Demystified. I really haven't heard of Holistic Squid before. And thinking about that idea of holistic is more about letting your body take care of itself and maybe not always approaching it just from the straight medical approach, kind of gives you that insight that perhaps Emily has some bias here about how she feels that our body should be treated for medical reasons, taking care of itself and using more natural remedies. So we use that same procedure as what we did for analyzing a single story, but now we're applying it to two stories and we're looking to compare and contrast across. It seems like there's pretty clear evidence that this author's perspective is that you should get the flu shot. It may not be perfect, but that it does enough to reduce the risk and it helps people out that you should get the flu shot. Compare it to this article where the author is basically saying the flu itself is not a life sentence, that there's many risks to getting the flu shot, and therefore you probably should not get the flu shot because of the long-term risks of the flu shot itself rather than the complications of the flu. In summary, it's important to really read these two articles critically because both present it in the same way. Should you get the flu shot? Should I get the flu shot? If I only read one of these articles and walked away from just the information presented within, chances are good I would not have a clear picture of the issue. Each one of these authors had its own perspective and presented certain information in alignment with that perspective. It was important for me to read both articles and to read them critically to think about what is the author's perspective, so now I can see both sides of the issue, weigh out the pros and cons for myself, and make an informed decision. So in summary, when you're looking for perspective, look at things like the title or the introductory paragraph. Those headings can kind of give you further clues about what the author thinks. Then look at the facts or evidence, paying particular attention to if there's certain facts that you feel are being omitted or missing. Then look at author's word choice to decide is there certain connotation or bias within that word choice. And finally, perhaps look at the author's credentials to see who's publishing this and what perspective they may have on the topic.